So let us start with the recap. Who was supposed to give a recap today?
Sir, I was there.
Adnan Vyas and Kareem. Yes. So please begin, Adnan.
Thank you, sir. Assalamualaikum all of you. Good morning.
We should be able to see you, Adnan.
Okay, sir. Sir, am I visible?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So the story that it was basically communication skill. That's a communication skill a practice that we had carried out in the previous class. So the story that was given was regarding the value of the barcodes, and it was the Ford company that found that some airbags in the cars may leak gases and cause harm to the driver. So the airbags were supplied by the company named TRW. TRW was using robots to accelerate the production. So an out of tolerance machine damaged the threading of the airbags. So airbags are devices that get inflated when there is an impact on it. So it prevents it prevents the damage getting transferred to the driver. So TRW stressed that there were very few bags with defect, and but the problem was that no one knew which airbags had defect. So Ford has to recall around 165,000 cars, and TRW was expected to share the expenses. So after this, TRW competitors were assigned 20% of the contracts. So TRW lost those contracts. So this was the damage that the TRW has to get through if they didn't use the uh, barcode system. So basically, so what happened was there were 4 volunteers in the exercise, and it was asked to the volunteers to narrate this story one by one subsequently in a linear model. So there was a sender, there was a receiver, and in between there was a medium. So what we saw from the beginning to the end was that the story got decreased, like the content in the story got decreased, and in the end we only saw that ear and the airbag. That that part of the story was transferred till the end. So the problem that was faced were the appropriateness of the medium. Written medium was not used, verbal communication was being used, so a lot of information got lost in it. The second thing was there was filtering in the communication. There were some additions or deletions in the story, like the first volunteer said airbags were getting leaked, like, but there was no such incidence in it. So that was what filtering is: addition or deletion or modification in the story. Also, the third barrier, these are barriers that we saw. The third barrier was information overloading. So relevant or irrelevant information is sometimes added to the story. Like a relevant information that I would like to give an example was that Sir mentioned the story of a journal, like Sir mentioned an incident of a journalist who couldn't use uh, who couldn't be in his studio because the office was destroyed and he had to use telephone as the medium. So in the, like, this story I think got its root in the current Israel-Palestine conflict, that Israel destroyed the office of Al Jazeera news channel. So I think this is an example of information overloading, but this was a relevant information that was given as an example by Sir. The next barrier that we saw was a psychological barrier. Better job is done when we are in relaxed state. Like personal example that I would like to give is when I gave the presentation like last time, I ran out of time. So in a hurry, I gave a lot of information in an absurd manner, and I used a term like dark web. Dark web is illegal, but I mentioned it that it is used in IT industry. So that is the effect of the psychological barrier that I felt. The another thing, the another barrier is the role of language. Like this is also known as semantic barrier, like use of technical language. As a civil engineer, I will like to give an example of columns. Like in the beginning, we used to call it pillar. So we got a lot of scolding because that is not the technical term that we had to use, and we have to use the term column. So that is also a semantic barrier. Some information will get lost through it also. The another barrier is of the national culture. The national culture, like it varies from one part of the country to another part of the country, and it also varies from one country to another country. Like example of it can be like shaking hands, kissing. Like in India, if you kiss while meeting someone, it will be considered awkward. But in Saudi Arab, if you meet someone and kiss, that is all okay. Like it is in their culture. That so and the another barrier that is there is defensiveness. Like when we feel we are under threat or we are being watched, our attitudes automatically get changed. So that is the another barrier, defensiveness. So what in the whole exercise we saw, there is a sender, there is a receiver, and there is a medium between it, but there are a lot of noises, and these noises are barriers that we just discussed. So to overcome barriers, we can use feedback mechanisms. Like we should move away from linear model to more interactive model. And like example of it I would like to give is a professor in the mechanical department. Like we all have been through our graduation days, and at the end of the course we were given feedback forms. We had to fill it and give it back to the teacher so that the teacher improves on teaching. Like there are different needs of a student, the teacher can improve on it. But the problem is that most of the teachers give it at the end of the semester. So it may be possible that a current batch of students prefer to study from the PowerPoint presentation. So, and they give advice to the teacher and they give feedback to the teacher to teach in PowerPoint. And in the next batch, when he teaches in PowerPoint, it is highly possible that the next batch want to get back to the board and marker method. So this is like an example that feedback mechanism is not used properly. Properly, what we can do is we can use this feedback mechanism just after 1 week of the teaching session, so the teacher gets improved on it. So this is just an example that how to use the feedback mechanism. If we use feedback mechanism, we can avoid the distortions in the communication skill. This was all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Adnan. Can we have Tareen presenting? Karam Tareen, yes.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Please switch on your video.
Should I start, sir?
Yes, please. We are waiting.
So, in the past class, what we did was a communication exercise. And should I tell the story, sir?
No need actually.
Okay. So, that exercise we were told about the communications, the importance of communication, and how important it is in a business. And sir, can I read my points that I made?
Yes.
Okay.
Better focus on the key learnings that we had from the exercise.
Okay, sir. So, in the last class, sir told that in a communication there are three things: sender and receiver and a medium through which the person communicates. So it may be written, verbal, or uh, through written or verbal. And then sir taught about the barriers of communication, in which there is sir taught about the barriers of the communication, and there was language, information overload, filtering, emotions, defensiveness, languages, and national culture. So in medium, sometimes there a disturbance is caused, and that disturbance is said to be a noise through the medium. That is, and there are types of noises. So in the types of noises, there are uh, so the types of noises are various, and we need to choose the appropriate medium through which we have to communicate to the person. And so the types of noises are we filter consciously and unconsciously when we read through a story, like the story that we read about Ford and TRW, and in that there was various communication gaps, and some of them were filters. First of all, in that there was when the person was reading, their perception and the grasping power also changes. The way they read the story, because every person is different, and they look through the story differently. So the way one person understands is not necessary that the other person will also understand the same way. So the perception also changes. So this is one of the major noises. And then there is information overload, and information overload. If you get a lot of information at once, you're not able to process it and know what is the correct information that is needed to be carried out, and what information is not necessary for the story to get forwarded. And then one other reason is emotional and psychological barrier. In emotional and psychological barriers, like if a person is getting nervous or is not able to be emotionally present and gets carried away, so in that case he or she probably might not be able to communicate the story properly. And then there is language and translation barriers. So in language and translation barriers, when there is a language gap, for example, if we are communicating a story in South India, probably in Kerala, and they don't understand Hindi properly, so there will be a language gap in that, and we probably won't be able to translate the communicated message as easily as we would in other language. So that is also one of the noises. Then jargons, sir had told us, and terminology, you could say. So in the Ford case, some people weren't able to understand the meaning of barcodes because it was a little bit technical, and some understood depending on their forces, and then there is the national culture. So in national culture, sir gave an example that the people in Kerala not like this, like they say yes, when they say yes, they're not like that. So that is also a major difference. So these were the types of noises that Sir taught us in the last class.
Okay, thank you, Aram.
Thank you, sir. And sir, I would like to also add that one of the major examples is you obviously teaching, because what you taught yesterday and what I am communicating today, so that is also a big difference.
So which barriers are operating?
I would say emotional and psychological as well, because I am a bit nervous. And what else? Too much information was given at once, so I had written points of it. But then again, I thought I would say a lot, and I'm not able to say much right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we have listened to Adnan and Aram today. And my feedback to Adnan would be that your delivery otherwise is very natural, and you present the ideas in a confident manner and in a relaxed manner. That's a good thing. But I think you need to be a bit more crisp in your delivery, isn't it? So there were repetitions, and also that judgment which we are all supposed to make. Like, for example, to me, perhaps there was no need to narrate the story. The story was the context in which we had discussed the barriers. So key learnings that we have had from that exercise, that ought to have been the focus. And so one of the important element of a good communication is this compactness which I was talking about. So on that account, I think, Adnan, you need to work a bit more. Otherwise, your delivery style is quite natural. And Arham, it is good on your part that you very genuinely accepted that you were maybe feeling some kind of pressure of the situation, which is very natural. You know, whenever we are in a new situation, we do feel this pressure. But the issue is, how do we handle this pressure? I read a quote which I read in a school, and this section of that school was especially for differently abled people. So they were part of the regular school, but for 1 hour they were brought to this center. So if they had some special issue, for example, dyslexia or whatever is the problem, they were given some special inputs to help them handle that disadvantage. So there was a quote stated over there, and it said, "If I am slow, I need to start early." And it was a very simple quote, but I found it very powerful, very apt. So this nervousness is very natural. It has to be there in a new situation, but the only way to overcome is to prepare even harder for it. So one of the elements of that is rehearsals. Maybe if we have a couple of takes and retakes. I read this about articles, that good articles are never written, they are always rewritten. So when we, look at our own performance, when we speak, for example, in front of a mirror, and then we see our own expressions, In your case, the key issue was the smoothness of the delivery. The entire presentation was moving in a halting manner. You had arranged the content, you must have jotted down the points, which was good, but the delivery part, the expression part, the last part of the preparation, perhaps that needs to be focused a bit more. And generally what happens is that when we are not fluent and we speak in a halting manner, so whatever are the gaps, we try to fill those gaps, and those are called fillers. Like in your case, the filler is ah. So that blocks the communication. So try to smoothen your delivery, and that will help you become even better communicator. So content was good, but you have to maybe content also, especially the last learning that we had, moving from the linear to more interactive models where we use feedback effectively, and that will complete the loop, and that way we can have more effective communication. That was the key learning of this exercise. So that needs to be focused. Now coming to the today's content, we will be talking about the last function of management, and that is controlling. And for controlling, I shall begin with a question, and I would like your response on this. We have two words, control and controls. Are these two words same? What do you think? Kamran says that one is a noun and other is a verb. Any other? From the English language point of view, it sounds as if controls are the plural of control. So generally when you add S to a word, it becomes plural. So is it like this? Generally, what are the controls that are being used in our family settings? Do you face some restrictions in your home? And generally, what are those restrictions?
To not go outside as frequent as one does.
Okay.
So moral and behavioral restrictions.
Such as?
Using mobile phone,
Yes.
there are restrictions on it.
Okay. Maybe don't use it for 2 hours, more than 2 hours, 3 hours, like that. So these are controls actually. The tools that we use to control. Controlling is the end. And we exercise that controlling through controls. So control is the end and controls are the means of controlling. Now let me ask you the second question. If we have more controls, does it lead to better control? Usman says no, it's not like that. What about others? Do they also feel like this? Very true, Usman. In fact, this very term controlling, does it sound good?
No, sir.
Actually, not at all. Because if you say to somebody that I'm controlling you or I'm trying to control you, do you think people will take it lightly or will take it kindly? And this is one of the biggest challenge of controlling. The more controls you create, the more business goes out of control. Because the focus then is more on, living up to those controls than fulfilling the demands of the business. And this you have seen in the families also. If parents try to control too much, every movement of their kids, does it create a very, very congenial environment in the family? If one receives a scolding for every deviation that occurs, I remember one observation from one of my uncle. He came to Aligarh in 60s and he studied here during 70s. He said, when my father sent me to Aligarh, naturally, you cannot have those kind of controls when you send the kid to study outside. The kind of controls you can exercise in the home. So he said, my father just said one statement, and he said that continued with me all through my stay in Aligarh. He said कि तुम जा रहे हो, तुम जिम्मेदार हो अब, बस मेरी दरख्वास्त ये है कुछ ऐसा ना करना कि तुम्हारी फैमिली को शर्मिंदा होना पड़े. That was the only statement that he made. And he said that was good enough for me to, guard myself against anything which may hurt my family or which may bring some disgrace to my family. Isn't it? So the paradox of controlling is that more controls you design, the more, difficult it becomes to control. And this I will explain using a few examples which I have experienced. Suppose you have a vice chancellor who feels like controlling what is happening in the classes. Many vice chancellors I have seen were very much concerned about academics. And in fact, one vice chancellor used to have the timetable of the entire university on his table. And very frequently he would, barge into a class unannounced just to check what is being taught, how it is being taught and all that. Now, what do you think about this kind of controlling? Is it good? Is it bad?
So too much of controlling does look bad.
Does look bad.
So it depends on the personalities too.
Okay, can you elaborate? When it could be good or when it could be bad?
So there are some people who can work in pressure only, and there are some people who likes without pressure.
I give you,
Some children are
I give you a
like
situation. I've got your point. See, it so happened. In fact, this happened in the class of my elder brother, who was studying in political science department. Then he was doing BA in political science, and there was an accomplished teacher there. He was teaching him, and it so happened that one vice chancellor, the then vice chancellor, he came into the class from the back door. The students could not see him, but the teacher saw him, because he had come very surreptitiously so that nobody notices that somebody has come. And he just sat there on one of the back bench. Now what happened that this created so much of pressure on the teacher that whatever he was teaching, he actually muddled up everything, and he was too nervous, and the student sensed that he is such a good teacher with what is happening to him. Then my brother says that we started asking him a few questions, and he said, sir, ye samajh mein nahi aaya, ye samajh mein nahi aaya. Sir, can you say it again? And after 5-6 minutes only, he was in his natural state. So actually, this is a intricacy that we need to understand when we try to control through such controls, two direct controls. It is not like measuring a physical phenomena. You are measuring a human phenomena. A physical phenomena is not impacted by the act of measurement. I give you an example. Suppose you intend to measure the rate of acceleration of a falling body. So you drop, let us say, an object from the top floor of a building, and you measure its rate of fall, or whatever the acceleration at which it is moving downwards. Now, this is a physical phenomenon, and your act of measurement will not impact the phenomena. The phenomena will continue to happen the way it is happening. But I described you a human situation when a vice chancellor enters the class. Will it impact the teacher? In fact, it could impact either way. It could impact positively, it could impact negatively. As somebody said, it could be sometimes good, sometimes bad. So in one of my classes, I had an English professor who was teaching in the class. And the vice chancellor came and sat in the class. Again, we also could not notice that the vice chancellor has come, because there was a back door from which people would enter in the class generally. So he came and he just sat on one of the back seat. Naturally, the teacher saw him, and that day, that teacher was at his poetic best. I mean, the words were flowing from his mouth, the choicest and the most beautiful of the words. Because in his case, unlike the previous teacher I talked about, this act that the vice chancellor has come to observe his performance could bring out the best in him. So that is what I was saying, that when we measure a phenomena, the act of measuring the phenomena, especially a human phenomena, impacts the phenomena. And it could impact positively, it could impact negatively. Okay. So now I will share with you a PPT which summarizes this discussion that we are having just now. Can you see this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So we started this question with controlling with these two questions. This is word controls plural of control, and then the second question, do more controls lead to more controls or better control? And the discussion that we had, we also clarified what is control and what are controls. So controls are measurements, but control means direction. Because you want things to move. When this uncle of mine who told me that his father said to him कि कुछ भी ऐसा ना करना कि family को शर्मिंदा होना पड़े. So actually it is direction setting, isn't it? As opposed to the controls like 2 घंटे से ज़्यादा मोबाइल नहीं देखना, isn't it? And controls actually deals with the events that have happened, because you can control only what has happened. But control deals with expectations, the direction I was talking about. कि हमारी उम्मीद, हमारी तुमसे तवक्को ये है कि अलीगढ़ जाके फैमिली का नाम पैदा करो, rather than bringing a disgrace to the family. So the controls again are analytical, concerned with what it is or what it was.
Excuse me, sir.
As opposed to that, controls are normative. Normative, what is normative? Norm setting. What ought to be, क्या होना चाहिए. कहीं ना कहीं जैसे आपके पेरेंट्स के जहन में ये एक्सपेक्टेशन होगी कि भाई आप अगर बहुत ज्यादा बाहर रहेंगे.
Sir, slides not visible.
Lights are not visible. Okay, that's what I asked in the beginning. Can you see it now? Is it
Yes, sir.
visible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I was talking about these two questions which I have shared with you. Now I was moving on to the second aspect, the difference between controls and control. And this is what I was discussing with you, that basically controls are means to exercise control. So controlling is the end. Expectations that you have, the desire that you have. Maybe the parents' desire is that our kids should grow in a balanced manner. That is their expectation. That is the end that they are looking forward to. They should use their time gainfully. So maybe then because of that only they are setting, some kind of restrictions on use of mobile. So then I discussed with you the challenges of exercising control, and one of the challenges that controls are neither objective nor neutral. I told you about the physical phenomena. When you measure a physical phenomena, the controls that you will set will be very objective and neutral, but not in case of a human phenomena, because it will impact the phenomena. One teacher, I told you, for example, may be adversely affected. The other teacher may be positively impacted. So you have to bring in that subtle element in your controls that, they are applicable to a larger lot of people, and those who are not able to follow them, you are able to segregate them and use some other ways of controlling, rather than applying the uniform controls to everybody. Now this is also a very important point. Control needs to focus on results. And what does this mean actually? Control needs to focus on results. Like for example, in your case, if you look in the family's context, the moral question is more important than the actual act of designing controls. Can you set your expectations properly before the kids? Can you explain them the logic of controls? If they are setting a time limit on the use of or restricting the use of mobile, what are the results they are expecting? How many times parents explain those results they are looking forward to? And unless they explain the results that they are expecting, those controls would create a kind of obnoxious environment in the families. And actually organizations also collection of individuals. So if we have too heavy controls in organizations, that will also actually impede action on the part of. In fact, in one organization, when a person joined and he was into sales, and he asked this question to his manager, and he said, okay, are there some restrictions on my travel and all that? What I'm entitled to second class and all that? When I go and make a sales call to another city, what kind of facilities that I'm entitled to, and all that. Generally, organizations have very elaborate rules for compensating your, travel expenses, especially if you are into sales. And this manager said, in our organization, the policy is use your good judgment, and that's all. Your judgment is the best control that you can use in such situations. So this is something which we need to understand while designing controlling. The last point is also very important. The controls are needed for measurable as well as non-measurable events. Now what does this mean? Generally what happens is we end up controlling what is measurable. जैसे मैं अपने कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आपको बताता हूँ, टीचर्स के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हमारी यूनिवर्सिटी में और दूसरी यूनिवर्सिटीज में अब क्या होने लगा है, व्हाट कैन बी मेजर्ड easily when you assess the performance of a teacher is the number of publications that a teacher has, in what kind of journals that publication has happened. But do you think that is all teaching is all about? Is it easy to measure the impact of a teacher on the students? The quality of learning environment created in the class, is it easy to measure? What do you think? So measuring somebody's publication is easy, but measuring the learning environment he creates in the class is difficult. So what generally happens when we design controls? We end up measuring the measurable and we give less importance to the non-measurable phenomena. And that way we may actually misdirect the efforts. और मैं इस बात को कह सकता हूँ क्योंकि I have seen this university in both the roles, initial first decade, almost first decade as a student, and then more than 30 years, 3 decades as teacher, that there has been a remarkable shift because of this assessment system we have designed. In my student days, there were teachers who would take pride in teaching their teaching. Teaching was their passion. But now, many of the teachers have become, publishing machines. And there are statements like publish or perish. I'm not denying the importance of research, quality research. But in a teaching university, there has to be a balance between teaching and research. Ultimately, it is the teaching which impacts the students. So we need controls for both measurable as also for non-measurable. Okay. So we will stop here, and again, I will request Zareen ma'am to please coordinate and have 2 volunteers for the recap tomorrow. If the students are ready, then they can write their name on the chat box. By Rishabh. One more. Junaid Ali. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.